Hello, friends. It's Hank, your pajama scholar, back with another AGR. And there's a lot of ground to cover today. I've been a little bit lackluster in my other productions, my other AGR productions recently, and for that, I apologize. It's been a lot on my mind, and I don't particularly feel like rehashing some things that you should already know, that most people are on about. I'm going to press on to the future, or past, present, and future, to try and put together a picture of what I believe happened 20 years ago, or even a little bit more, where we are in the present day, and how I believe that we best can move forward in the future. So first, what I would like to do is go back to 9/11. And I'm going to propose a theory. And the theory is this. Yes, the 9/11 researchers uncovered a lot, who was involved and so forth. But the question is sometimes not how, but why. Or cui bono, benefits. And you would like to think, oh, it's just to line the pockets of the military-industrial complex, but I don't think it is that simple. Here's my theory. I believe that prior to 9/11, Western intelligence services became aware of the Russian ambition, the Russian and German ambition, to build 3 pipelines across Europe or across the areas that are between Germany and Russia. And they were going to build 3 pipelines. Now, having had caught wind of this ability to supply energy to Europe through Russia would have, at that time, meant the demise of the petrodollar. And I believe that in this effort, the Russians already had the initiative. And so, hastily, the United States, UK, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and to a lesser extent, but to Germany's benefit, Germany. Because from my perspective, finance had to move from somewhere. It would have moved through a London bank. So it wouldn't be necessary for Western intelligence services to know how this is going down. Like, they got word of a preemptive attack. It was probably that they had prepared it after learning about the Russian idea to build these pipelines and supply Europe with energy. So the finance had to move through a London bank, no big deal. It gets traced back to Germans. We find all sorts of different operatives mixed up in this whole bunch, namely Saudi Arabia, Israel. Clearly the United States was complicit, or our government was complicit in this. The UK, And if the UK and Israel are aware of it because they're part of the Five Eyes network, Canada would have been aware of it, Australia would have been aware of it, Germany would have been aware of it, even though they're not part of the Five Eyes. So let's first take a look at Afghanistan, how this initially began to unfold. When General Wesley Clark made his statement, when he found out he was sitting in the Pentagon or whatever, and they were going to go after Afghanistan, and they told him, no, we're going to need, I think, 5 other countries. I could pull that clip up by General Wesley, but I'm fairly sure that you're, or General Clark, but I'm fairly confident that you have all seen it if you're a subscriber to this channel. And he talks about how quickly they want to go through these other nations, but he's not quite aware of for what reason. Now, I believe that the reason for this was to establish another pipeline, or a set of pipelines, 3 come to mind, that would also go into Germany from North Africa through Israel. We would have probably through Saudi Arabia, through Israel, clearly through Syria, clearly through Iraq. So I think the goal was to link the oil fields in the Middle East to Europe and create a port in Israel that would increase its geostrategic significance in the world. From there, they could move oil in tankers from Israel, if they wanted to, all around the world. And this is why I think people, believe that the Israelis were primarily to account for this, because it was a lot of Mossad operations. They played their part. They were trying very hard to use what little resources they had, but very effective intelligence apparatus in that part of the world, to sow as much discord as possible and able to bring those nations that would link this pipeline that would lead into Europe under control, or at least create the security arrangement where sovereign states couldn't really necessarily do anything about it to prevent it. And time was of the essence. It was very important to get this done, because now we're at Western powers are basically in a race against time, against Russia. So Afghanistan, when they talk about it being about the poppies, about heroin, I believe that this is true to a large extent, because you have to finance a war. And that's one way to do it. It's through drugs. You also can do off-book operations, because a lot of this entire plan hinges on almost, dare I say, almost like a blitzkrieg style movement. Securing the money, securing the high ground in Asia, preventing any kind of jihadist counterattack from Afghanistan, putting a check on Russia to the south, a check on China from the west. And none of this obviously could be revealed, because you can never, in war, you can't let your opponents or your enemies or adversary, not necessarily enemies, but your adversaries, know what you're up to. And obviously, the UK has a very big interest in this. And Germany has set it up now, clever as the Germans are, in this situation where it's like heads we win, tails you lose. So this is, I think, why we find German intelligence mixed up in this whole thing. It's why we see Saudi Arabia mixed up in this whole thing, because it's their product, basically, that's going to get undercut. It's why we see Israel mixed up in the whole thing. It's because their geostrategic security arrangement almost now depends on whether or not they can get this pipeline completed, or pipelines completed. So Americans are not interested in foreign entanglements, but they didn't. I don't think you couldn't sit down and explain to most Americans, why you have to do that. You create a false flag and instill this patriotic fervor. So in a sense, all the 9/11 researchers are right. They're all correct. They found out all the information. But I'm not sure I ever heard an explanation as to why. So I believe that was the reason for 9/11. I believe that was the reason for the false flag. And I do not believe that you can squarely place the blame on Israel. I believe that Israel... See, people have a tendency to say that America is a client state of Israel, but that's so far from the truth. It's ridiculous. Israel ends up being a very convenient scapegoat in many instances. But their reputation for... And this is not a discussion about Israel, so let's just skip that for now. Let's move on to the future. Let's talk about America's future, about the future of the United Kingdom, about the future of Europe. What's going to happen now that Germany and Russia are going to complete these pipelines? What was... essentially, Russia was being encircled, because that's basically the way that militaries work. I mean, encirclement is the way to win. You encircle with Afghanistan, you encircle with the Ukraine, and with NATO pushing further towards the Russian borders. And the Russian Federation took their opportunity when they Sorry about that, you guys. Sorry about that. All right, is that going to work? All right, I think the Russian Federation took its opportunity. It needed to. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Technical difficulties, what can you do? The Russian Federation had to take that opportunity in Crimea. That's not really. Let's move forward here from the past. And let's talk about now that we realize that these pipelines are going to be completed in through Russia and into Europe. I believe that that's in the best security interest for Europe. And I'm, as an American, I say, for the interests of peace and stability in Europe and a good relationship with Russia, even if we are to have to reorganize, to have to rethink the way that we live our lives, the way that we have to rethink our reserve currency, the way that we have to rethink our leadership role in the world, I'm perfectly pleased with that. I believe that peace in Europe, peace across Eastern Europe and into Russia, and a very fruitful future for both Germany and Europe at large, with Russia as an ally, is going to be extremely good. And so I don't feel in any way any kind of disappointment if trade and energy leads to a peaceful and stable Europe. Nothing pleases me more, in fact. So we have to rethink the way that the United States does business. And our long-time ally have been the UK, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, Mexico, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam is a trading partner, although I understand how they have to see to their own interests. But I look very favorably towards Vietnam. I look very favorably towards Russia. I feel when it comes to Canada and America, we are one nation of two laws. When it comes to Russia and the United States, I look at it as Mother Russia and Uncle Sam. We've always supported each other in times when times really got tough, whether that was famines during the time of Hoover's presidency, when the Soviet Union had was ruling Russia and the other territories. We were happy to send aid in the way of food, despite the fact we had ideological differences. Russia has been responsible for using their naval fleet to help protect the United States before we even had a navy. We owe a lot to the Russian people. We defeated the Nazis together. And one thing that everybody knows that I hate is the fascists. And after having gone through something like that, we're basically, in my opinion, blood brothers and sisters, relatives, so to speak. So, but when it comes to the UK, and what's currently going on in Australia and in the UK, where we see, or even in the United States, but to a lesser extent or lesser degree, as far as I'm aware, with these fascist mandates that we see that are inspired by corporations that are coercive towards the people, that would have, people either lose their jobs, or you need a vaccine passport, blah, 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 blah. Well, I believe that the United States will eventually, and I have a feeling sooner rather than later, abandon any idea of these mandates, and they'll probably bring the hammer down on the fascists, big pharma, whatever, these mandates, because it is in our national security, from my perspective. And if we are to lead in soft power throughout the world, we must lead by example. And the first thing that we are committed to in the United States is to liberty and freedom, and to a democratic ideal. We're not going to come off of 20 years of war, make hypocrites of ourselves, create a fascist system, and expect to have the mandate of heaven, as the Chinese would call it, if we intend to wield soft power effectively. We cannot be hypocrites. So, with this whole deal between, I caught a little criticism earlier, or I actually delivered a little bit of criticism. Let's see if I can find it here. Here we go. I'll bring it up for you guys.
The cameraman. We can.
You're in some big fucking trouble, mate. Big.
This is insane. How many people are they tackling here? This is 5 or so people. Maybe more. Shopping center being attacked. They're just.
All right, I found it. Just bear with me for one moment.
Absolutely disgusting. Cops just driving down the street in their militarized vehicles, hopping out, chasing people down, and then beating them up, knee to the back, attacking people with the butt of their rifles. Check this out. Stomping on people, Orwell style. Just absolutely crazy. Okay, next up, this is just random people, apparently, outside of a shopping center being attacked by police. Check this out. So tackled to the ground, at least 2 people, and then they're just start beating on them. Disgusting behavior, disgusting police, disgusting government. Fuck the New World Order. And fuck these police. Disgusting behavior, as I keep saying. Let's go to the next video here. This might be the same clip from a different angle, but it looks slightly different.
Now I hope to to get to the point here. This guy makes a point in this video, and maybe I'll leave a link or review it sometime, some other time, or maybe we'll get to it during this video. But his point is that the United States is condoning this tyrannical behavior by offering the submarine deal to the Australians. And I couldn't see it as further from the truth, because, you know, it's an over $68 billion deal. I mean, it's far beyond $68 billion. $68 billion was just for the French diesel subs. It's a very big card to play. It's a very big chip to play. And my hope is that the United States can lead by example and bring the force of law against these tyrannical mandates, which will in turn inspire the British to do an about face. Because the British I have a great deal of respect for leaving the European Union and standing on their own with Brexit. And if you're willing to go out to make your own rules like that and not be under a European hegemony, or I'm not sure exactly how you say it, that to me is very impressive. To see the resistance that the British people have given against these vaccine mandates, to see the resistance that the Australians have given these vaccine mandates. No, I don't think it is to condone these tyrannical actions. I think it gives America an opportunity to apply soft pressure to these governments. And what does it do for the UK? Because I've been thinking a great deal about the UK, because the European Union will disintegrate. Of that I have no doubt. And it could cause civil wars and all other kinds of problems in Europe. Not to mention the migrant issues that Erdogan holds like the sword of Damocles over all of Europe. Not to mention, now that the United States has pulled out of Afghanistan, the jihadists have no more need to concentrate their forces in Afghanistan, and they're battle-hardened fighters with the ability to reach Europe. So for the national security of the United Kingdom, I don't want to leave them out there with their ass in the wind. I don't want them hanging out to dry. And I want the United Kingdom to be somewhat insulated from the affairs of Europe, no matter which way Europe goes. Because I do not want to see another World War. I do not want to see World War III. And world wars have a tendency, well, as far as I'm aware, all of them have started in Europe. So to create this shield, another wall, a bulwark for the United Kingdom, to make sure that they're not out there on their own, and to help them realize their imperial ambitions in the modern age, to be able to expand again, to rebuild their fleet, their naval fleet, to link up with Australia. So between the United Kingdom and the United States, we should be able, if we have the mandate of heaven and our leadership realizes the wisdom of having a free people, we have to lead by example. If you're going to wield soft power, you have to be people of your word. You have to know who you are, what you stand for, and where you're going. And then we can apply soft power pressure to the Australian government, and they will capitulate on these standards of these fascist tactics. So it's always been my aim to prevent bloody revolution, to have revolution, but to have peaceful revolution. And however it takes to create a situation where rulership in these countries, in all of our countries, can see the mutual benefit in peace, in cooperation, in respecting our Western traditions and values, to enable the British to be able to expand. We've got, in the United States, I know we've got an excess of material right now. It's always dangerous to have a lot of soldiers hanging around with nothing to do. We may want to extricate ourselves from Europe because I believe that Europe is building its own security arrangements, and the most dangerous thing that ever appears to happen in Europe is when France and Germany decide to raise an army. So I hope that the pipeline keeps them at peace, but I suspect that whatever comes from European from a European disintegration, it's going to have repercussions that will go into the Muslim world, into the caliphate. This happens over and over and over again in history. Europe is vulnerable to that, big time. So I believe that would be a mutually beneficial strategic arrangement. This soft power leading by example. Canada, of course, would not be so inclined to go communist. The Australians would not be so inclined to have to suffer under communist-style despotism or fascism because they are such large trading partners with the Chinese. The UK wouldn't have to suffer under any despotism or get drawn again into another European conflict because they're able to expand again into Asia. I find it to be very beneficial for the United States because we will not have to bear the burden of creating the conditions for a freedom of navigation in the world. I don't want to create the conditions where the West is threatening anybody. That's far from my mind. The reason that I think that it's more prudent to build a stronger Australian naval presence and a stronger British naval presence is because the Japanese are our strong allies, and I have a great deal of respect for the Japanese. But in that respect for the Japanese also comes a healthy fear and a wariness. Because while the Australians may not be inclined to use a nuclear weapon as a first strike, I have very little doubt that if the Japanese decided to procure nuclear weapons, they would unapologetically use them in a first strike way. And there's absolutely nothing that we could do at that point other than to back Japan. And I see no other target that Japan would use a first strike capability against other than China. And China is not our enemy either. I don't want to create an adversarial position between China and the United States. Yes, we have ideological differences. But as we move towards a future that has where we're going to aggressively pursue diplomacy, and I would like to see an expansion. I believe in peace through strength. I would like to see a Pax Americana, a 400-year or more peace in the world, if the United Kingdom and Australia and Russia and Germany and France and Japan and China, we can all see together our mutual strategic advantage in cooperation over confrontation. Because, yes, we can get together and saber rattle all day. To my perspective, it does absolutely no good to provoke the Chinese, and the Chinese don't really need to provoke anybody else. It's already a tentative situation in that part of the world anyway. And China, as far as diplomacy goes, have been doing more harm to themselves than anybody else possibly could have. I've been saying for a long time, because of a rumor that I will never know is if it's true or not, that the Chinese found Western or American spies inside of China and put them to death. And we in the West found a Chinese spy, Huawei's executive, and the Canadians did the right thing in detaining a Chinese spy, but they didn't do anything so radical as to execute her. And she's going home, back to China. And so for China and the West to have a friendly gentleman's agreement, despite the fact that we have ideological differences and we don't need a Cold War, we can, instead of executing our intelligence officers and really provoking everyone, just do the same thing that we always... I mean, even Putin jokes about it. Just exchange the spies, and then that way they can get debriefed and everybody knows where they stand. We don't need escalations in this regard. And it creates a tone of civility, at least back-channel civility, that hopefully China and the United States can both brag about, like, ha-ha, caught your guy, ha-ha, caught your guy, and then, it's just an exchange. I think Putin's joke goes something like this. It was like, an American spy comes into the KGB, and he says, I'm an American spy, and I have a weapon, and I want to surrender myself. And the first guy says, he says, I'm an American spy, and I want to surrender myself. And the first guy in the KGB says, do you have a weapon? And the American spy goes, yeah. He says, well, go to room 219 or whatever. So he goes down the hall, he goes to room 219. And the KGB officer there says, you're an American spy, and you want to... I'm probably not telling the joke as good as Putin. And you want to... I need a drink if I'm going to tell a joke. And you want to surrender, and you have a weapon. Do you have a communications device? And the American spy goes, yeah, I got a communications device. He said, well, go to room 313. So the American spy goes up to the room, and the guy says, I'm an American spy. I want to surrender. I have a weapon. I have a communications device. And the KGB agent in room 113 or 313 or something says, "You know what? I told this joke badly. I'll see if I can find Putin's joke. Let's let Putin tell Putin's joke." Ridiculous. That was the worst. I'm usually pretty good at telling jokes, but that was fucking terrible. That was fucking terrible. Oh, here we go. Yep, that's it. You can tell it in 40 seconds too. Let's get hooked up here.
Человек пришел на Лубянку и говорит: я шпион, хочу сдаться. Ему говорят: а вы чей шпион? Он говорит: американский. Ну, тогда в 5-ю комнату. Он пошел в 5-ю комнату. Я американский шпион, хочу сдаться. А у вас оружие есть? Есть. В 7-ю, пожалуйста. Он в 7-ю. Я шпион, хочу сдаться, у меня есть оружие. В 10-ю. В 10-ю. Я шпион, хочу сдаться, у меня есть оружие. А средства связи есть? Есть. В 20-ю комнату пришел. Я шпион, у меня есть оружие, средства связи, хочу сдаться. Его спрашивают: а задание-то у вас есть? Есть. Ну идите и исполняйте, не мешайте людям работать.
Oh, that's hilarious. So,
Join us.
Putin making fun of the bureaucracy and what involved. That's funny to me. Anyway, let's get back, I think, to the main point here. Soft power, holding our principles, creating a security arrangement where the Japanese are less inclined to pursue nuclear technology because we have their back. The situation where the Chinese are less inclined to be aggressive because nobody needs it, quite frankly. It gives the British, like I say, an opportunity to do their thing that they do with diplomacy famously. To do for the Australians to be able to maybe even begin to realize some of their ambitions through travel, through trade, through diplomacy. I believe it will stabilize the region, and it also takes the onus off of the United States. So if one of our battleships, say, in an accident, or not even an accident, a provocation, or a false flag, maybe perhaps, and one of our battleships or carriers or something got sunk, it wouldn't immediately draw the United States into the conflict because we've got British and Australian fleets moving out through there. So if one of them gets hit, it puts the psychological and cultural onus on them and gives us all a little bit more time to think about what we're going to do, so we don't always have to be this 5-minute, like less than 5-minute thinking, or this quarterly thinking. We as Westerners can learn from China. We can start to think, or even, not even Japan, or Japan, instead of having this blind quarterly thinking, to expand our thoughts, our views into longer range 100-year plans. This also takes the responsibility and the onus off of the President of the United States. Biden did finish the war in Afghanistan. He did. And for that, I believe that we should be celebrating. I know it's all overshadowed at the moment by this fascist bullshit that we've got to deal with the mandates. But I think we can, in the interest of national security, make a strong argument to end that shit. And I don't think that you'd want those fucking, I don't say fucking, but I don't think that any billionaire is going to want, or trillionaire, or any company is going to want the military crawling all over their ass when it comes to let's just say, a more peaceful and prosperous future where the military has also a lot of money at stake as far as, improving intelligence and navy and so forth, without being overly provocative. And that way, as we retool, we don't necessarily need a fiat money system. We can actually bring it back to sound money, because through through this type of cooperative arrangement, it lessens the financial burden on each of us. We don't have to be so rapacious in trade. We don't have to look at ourselves as people that are taking advantage of indigenous populations, which, in my opinion, in some instances has been part of our culture in the United States and in any imperial culture. And that, in a sense, is the same type of despotism, that colonial despotism, that the Australian government, the UK government, and to a lesser extent, the US government, that we here in the West have all gotten a taste of. The French have gotten a taste of it. The Germans have gotten we've all in the West gotten a taste of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a truncheon by basically a greedy, despotic government. So, leading by example. All right, so retooling, piece of strength. I have some ideas on garrison, on creating garrisons. Friendly ports, nothing under, you're going to do what we say or we're going to shoot you, because that would be the same type of, that would be the same receiving end that we've all experienced that we don't want to do to somebody else. So I think all of this, as terrible as it's been, we can see it as a learning experience. And even while we deglobalize, even while our individual countries find a place for ourselves in a cooperative world instead of a competitive world. Yes, there's always going to be competition, but a good kind of competition. Competition is healthy. Competition is what a free capitalist society is all about. It's about creating the fertile grounds for business, industry, entrepreneurs from top to bottom to survive and to lead by example. We could do some trust busting, kick a few billionaires' asses. We could definitely retool. We can make this work in a quick way, and I see all types of economic opportunity here for the United States, playing to what we do best. And I'll even take this to a place that's somewhat stereotypical, and I don't mind that. It is to say that we people have strengths and we have weaknesses. And I think it's fairly well known. You can put Japanese against Americans, and as far as Japanese innovation goes, I don't think that America can compete with that level of innovation. I don't think that. I think what plays more to the American is the industry where we're building parts that are just interchangeable parts, a standardized system for the world to use, like Radio Shack components. The British have always had a genius for radio. So we would create we're build parts, basically. It's interchangeable parts. That's what mechanism, becoming industrialized, it's what having everything, having interchangeable parts. That was the biggest part of mechanizing, interchangeable parts, standardized parts. And then we would write the book, a big fat book, on every part that we made. And these are all the ways that we think that we can destroy it. And we're going to just try and destroy every part that we can. We're going to figure out every way that we think that we can use it. And then as we sell the part, we want to see if you can figure out how to destroy it. Have you thought of something that we haven't thought of? Have you thought of a new way to use this in a better way? And supply those parts to obviously the United Kingdom, obviously Australia, obviously anybody that wants to buy them. And then rely on innovation where innovation is strong. I'm not saying that we can't be incredibly innovative in the United States, because we're a big country. We do have a lot of intellectual capital. But we're no dummies. But as far as, I don't know, our people go, I just don't see that being our role. I see also, too, if we want to talk about environmentalism, we're going to get rid of planned obsolescence. In a sense where if you get that part, it's only going to fail the way that we said it was going to fail. We're not planning for it to fail. We're planning for it for you to only need it to buy it one time, where you're going to know when it's going to fail and how to fail, or you're going to test it in your own way and try and break it. And then we've got to think about how to make it better. It wouldn't be like China, where you buy in America, you would come to us and buy a frying pan that you would have to replace. No, you would only need one frying pan for your whole life. So when we talk about saving money, when we talk about the environment, we talk about only making something one time, or making something one time, or if it's something that requires many components, it's not disposable like the Chinese often would make, or even in the United States we had this planned obsolescence. Our money will come from creating a superior product, one that will not fail, and that will also, I believe, reinforce culturally what we in the United States are all about. We're about creating a fair deal, a good deal, above board. So you know what you're getting up front. Anyway, I think we're going on probably an hour. It's been Hank, your pajama scholar. Catch you on the flip side.